Hey there, night wanderer. Imagine slipping quietly from your own world right into the raucous, smoky, and ever so slightly sticky heart of the medieval tavern. Tonight, I'm inviting you to step inside history's most overlooked stage, where the scent of adventure mingles with the aroma of spilled ale and deeply questionable stew. Beneath these low, creaking beams, stories are traded, secrets whispered, and the fate of a chicken, or possibly your dignity, is decided at the roll of a dice. But what really happens behind that battered wooden door? Who's truly in charge when the laughter drowns out the brawls, and every bench seems to have its own ghost story? By the end of tonight's journey, you might just discover what the tavern keeper knows that nobody else dares admit. If you genuinely enjoy this kind of historical sleepwalking, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps me keep the candles burning. And please, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. Let's make this the world's coziest, most time-traveling bedtime gathering. So, go ahead and dim those lights, settle in, and prepare to leave the 21st century behind. Let's wander together down a muddy street where horse hooves, wood smoke, and the faint hint of overcooked onions fill the damp air. The rain has either just begun or only recently stopped, so everything glistens in that special medieval way, meaning your feet are already squelching in shoes that really deserved a retirement party. Hunger gnaws. Your cloak is clinging uncomfortably to your arms, and you've sidestepped more carts full of root vegetables than anyone should endure in one evening. You need a drink, but there are no neon signs, no helpful reviews, and absolutely no one named Siri to guide you through these winding lanes. Instead, your ears become your compass. Somewhere ahead, past the clang of the blacksmith's hammer and the fishmonger's passionate defense of his suspiciously wiggly eels, a cacophony of laughter, shouting, and the off-key bellow of someone serenading a goose cuts through the night. That's your beacon. Up ahead, a lopsided wooden building leans into the street with the confidence of someone who's had 5 too many. Over the door, a splintered sign dangles, painted with a creature that might be a barrel, a bear, or perhaps the artist's cryptic commentary on both. Either way, this is your stop. Welcome to the tavern. The front step glistens with a slick coat of something you hope is just ale. As you push open the thick iron-hinged door, the sound it makes is less a creak and more an epic saga, one that could earn applause if only doors got paid. Instantly, you're hit with a wall of warmth and the unmistakable perfume of smoke, drenched wool, stale beer, and a meaty mystery that is probably best left unsolved. Congratulations. You've arrived. The ceiling is so low that anyone above average height is in constant danger of a concussion, and the floor beneath your feet is not just dirty, it's honest to goodness earth, liberally sprinkled with straw as a kind of medieval wishful thinking. There are no private corners, no polished waiters gliding between tables, and certainly no expectation of quiet. This is a medieval tavern, and it operates on only 2 settings, rowdy and closed because something caught fire. You spot a vacant spot on a wobbly bench near the hearth, but it's suspiciously damp, and you wisely decide not to ask why. Nearby, 2 men are locked in a heated debate over a missing chicken, while another, clutching a soup ladle, is passed out in a position that suggests he fought valiantly and lost. Under one of the tables, a one-eyed dog gnaws on a bone with the air of someone fully settled into a long-term lease. And this, friend, is just the entrance. You haven't even found your seat, and already it smells like a night destined for legend, or at least a headache. As the heavy tavern door thuds closed behind you, the darkness presses in, wrapping itself around your senses like a slightly soggy woolen blanket. It's warm, it's heavy, and it's definitely hiding some secrets. Your eyes adjust slowly. Flickering candlelight licks the soot-stained walls, sending shadows dancing in ways that might make you wonder if the chairs are plotting something. At the far end, the hearth blazes away with more enthusiasm and safety, providing both essential warmth and the ever-present risk of an indoor campfire. Smoke coils lazily overhead, stubbornly refusing to escape through a chimney that's probably blocked by something best left unidentified. But what truly overwhelms you isn't the noise or the heat. It's the smell. The aroma of a medieval tavern is less a fragrance and more a full-body experience. Top notes of tangy room-temperature ale waft through the air, splashed across every available surface. Beneath that, the pungent musk of sweat, fresh and ancient, human, animal, and possibly mythical, lingers. Add in the sharp edge of mouldy bread, wet straw fermenting underfoot, and the faintest suggestion of stewed onions, and you have a scent profile so powerful that not even the bravest perfumer would dare capture it. The tables are monuments to generations of mischief, carved deep with initials, crude sketches, and the kind of knife marks that tell 1,000 unprintable stories. They wobble with a stubborn pride, refusing to ever sit quite flat. The benches groan under the collective weight of boots, cloaks, and decisions that probably seem better in daylight. The dirt floor promises authenticity, layered with straw meant to soak up more than just spilled drink. Think of it as medieval carpet, if you will. You tread carefully, your foot occasionally sinking into something with a texture so enigmatic that your imagination does the rest. The crowd isn't just a collection of patrons. It's a living, breathing organism. Laughter erupts at one table, while at another, the economics of pig pricing is being debated with the seriousness of a royal council. A woman slams her mug down so hard that half her drink escapes, but no one bats an eye. At the next table, a man stares into the candlelight, lost in either profound thought or the realization that he's forgotten how to sit. A sneezing fit erupts nearby, and the entire left side of the room instinctively leans away as if choreographed. And yet, for all the chaos, there's a strange sense of welcome here. The tavern pulses with life, raw, unfiltered, and gloriously unbothered by your modern standards. It's the medieval town's social engine, minus the hygiene, plus several extra decibels of shouting. You finally claim your seat. It's not just damp. It's probably cursed. But for the moment, it's home. At first glance, the tavern's layout looks like it was arranged during a minor earthquake, and then everyone decided it was good enough. There's no master plan. Just a haphazard spread of tables, benches, barrels, and a suspiciously draughty crate that someone insists is a chair. Everything is either too close together or too far apart, depending entirely on your blood alcohol content. The real centerpiece is the hearth, a roaring fire casting both warmth and a generous helping of smoke. Those with seats nearby bask in its glow, while everyone further away relies on ale to keep the chill at bay. If you're searching for a bar, you'll find nothing more than a sturdy plank stretched across two barrels, sagging under the collective weight of mugs, jugs, and elbows. And standing behind it, orchestrating this glorious mess, is the tavern keeper. The tavern keeper is not just a bartender. They are the unofficial monarch of this unruly dominion. No crown needed, just a commanding presence. If the keeper is a man, he's built like a barrel, solid, grizzled, and unmistakably carved from the cured meats and hard lessons of tavern life. If a woman, and it often is, she's sharp as a smith's file, able to silence a room with a single withering look. Either way, they've witnessed every possible mishap, heard every excuse, and cleaned things out of straw that defy polite description. Regulars get a knowing nod, strangers are met with a narrowed eye, and troublemakers are greeted by the business end of a mug, delivered with unerring accuracy. The tavern keeper is a multitasking marvel, pouring drinks, shouting orders, and shooting the kind of glare that could curdle milk. There are no menus here. You ask what's available, brace for impact, and receive the answer, ale, or wait your turn. If you're lucky, you might get a hint of something stronger, but don't expect details. There's a staircase, narrow and splintery, that leads to rooms above. Every step creaks out a warning, and you spot an old boot dangling from the railing. Could be a lost shoe, could be a warning, could be both. Some taverns boast a back room shrouded in mystery. Is it for storage? Gambling? The place where those who insulted the barmaid vanished without a trace? The smart money says just don't ask. The walls are stained with centuries of soot, and the tiny windows are covered with greasy cloth or animal hide. Every surface has been thoroughly polished by generations of elbows, boots, and the occasional passing chicken. In spite of all this, or perhaps because of it, the tavern works. There's a rhythm to the chaos, an unspoken understanding of who sits where, when to shout, and when to duck. It's not order, but it is a kind of harmony. At the center of it all stands the tavern keeper, the undisputed ruler of this raucous kingdom. Their authority goes unquestioned, not by the local lord, not by the tax collector, not even by the drunkest patron. The keeper is equal parts chef, server, accountant, babysitter, and, when the need arises, the swift hand of justice. Behind the bar, they keep a mental ledger of who's paid, who owes, and who's reached their limit. Literacy might be rare in the medieval world, but tavern memory is truly terrifying. The keeper's mood sets the tone for the entire night. If they're smiling, the place hums with good cheer. If they're cross, you'd be wise to finish your drink quickly and keep your jokes to yourself. They referee every argument, judge every cheating scandal, and are always the first to reach for a club when a fight threatens to get out of hand. You do not mess with the tavern keeper. They also know everything. Who's deep in debt? Who's sneaking around after hours? Who's just arrived in town under a suspiciously new name? Need information? A quiet word with the keeper, and maybe a small bribe, will get you farther than asking the town crier. Need protection? Park yourself near the bar? Need a favor? Best hope you didn't break a mug last week. Some keepers have a helper, a son, daughter, spouse, or perhaps a scruffy orphan they've adopted and now employ as a pint-sized labourer. These assistants dash between tables, ferrying drinks, mopping floors, and desperately trying not to get trampled by a wayward boot. To you, this tavern may look like glorious chaos, but it's actually a delicate ecosystem. And holding it all together, like a storm god in a very stained apron, is the tavern keeper, the single thread preventing the whole place from unravelling into a brawl or a fire. Without them, the ale would dry up, the roof would cave in, and the stories would fade into silence. But tonight, you're lucky. The keeper is at their post, the fire is roaring, and the air buzzes with possibility. You've crossed the threshold into a world where history isn't written in books, but carved into the wood and whispered across the table. So, before you even think about ordering that drink, just take a moment to appreciate the true ruler of this strange, sticky little kingdom. Next up, we'll settle you in at your seat, right in the middle of the mayhem. Don't worry, elbows and spilled stew included. You ease yourself onto a splintery wooden bench, careful not to sit on anything sticky or mysterious. The bench wobbles as you settle in, and the air around you is a swirl of elbows, steaming bowls, and the unmistakable tang of wet wool. Your throat is parched, your boots are still regretting that last puddle, and you can practically hear your stomach plotting a mutiny. But here you are, guest of honour in the grand sleep tour of history, and the first order of business is the drink. Don't expect a glossy menu, a clean glass, or even a consistent colour. This is a medieval tavern, where the drink selection ranges from possibly potable to immediate regret. Let's begin with the ever-present ale. It arrives in a battered mug that could be wood, clay, or something the tavern keeper invented. The ale itself is thick and cloudy, swirling with bits of grain and little islands of yeast. Sometimes there's a hint of something extra, a stray hair, a fleck of straw, or, for the truly lucky, a surprise chunk that might once have been part of someone's beard. The flavour is robust, to put it kindly, and the temperature is somewhere between lukewarm and recently sat near the fire. No one asks about the brewing process, because the less you know about the dog napping in the back room, the better. You take a cautious first sip, bracing for either enlightenment or a minor medical emergency. You take a cautious first sip, bracing for either enlightenment or a minor medical emergency. Now, for a touch of medieval elegance, mead is offered. The name alone conjures visions of royal feasts and golden goblets, but reality pours you a sticky, sweet concoction that tastes like honey, fermentation, and perhaps a dash of wild optimism, if the innkeeper brewed it. Each mug is a gamble. Will it be floral and warming, or sharp enough to peel paint? On a good night, it's reserved for lords, blushing brides, or that bard in the corner who insists he's been paid in worse. On a bad night, the mead fizzes with an enthusiasm that can only be described as explosive, and you'll be chasing bees from your cup. Cider is another adventure. Made from apples of uncertain origin, it's poured into a chipped mug that's seen more sunrises than you have. The flavor is bold, tart, tangy, and with a faint echo of overripe fruit. Some apples were freshly picked, others clearly had a few extra weeks on the ground to contemplate the meaning of life. This drink is for those who want to forget the scent of the farmer beside them or the state of their own socks. If you're lucky, the mug hasn't doubled as a soup bowl since morning. Wine, while technically available, is for the brave or the oblivious. Unless you're in southern Europe or the local noble is slumming it, the wine is usually thin, sour, and poured with a heavy side of sarcasm. It's watered down to stretch the cask, and what flavor remains is best described as historically accurate. Good wine is strictly reserved for bishops, merchant princes, and the mysterious figure in the corner who apparently just sold a wagon load of onions. For everyone else, it's a lesson in humility, served with a raised eyebrow from the innkeeper. And then there's water, the ultimate gamble. Choosing water in a medieval tavern is an act of either supreme confidence or utter desperation. Wells are unreliable. Boiling costs precious firewood, and invisible hazards lurk in every sip. Even the children drink ale, not because they're aspiring to be the next town drunk, but because it's safer than rolling the dice on dysentery. The idea of a refreshing glass of water is a distant dream, somewhere between enchanted spring and wishful thinking. No one here is measuring out shots or shaking up cocktails. Drinks arrive in whatever vessel is handy, a wooden mug, a battered clay cup, or a metal flagon that's seen better centuries. Sometimes last night's stew still clings to the rim, adding a little extra seasoning to your beverage. You raise your mug, take a sniff that's both hopeful and cautious, and sip. It's warm, it's earthy, and it leaves a lingering aftertaste of adventure, or perhaps just dust. But in the medieval tavern, if it's wet and doesn't immediately cause distress, it's considered a fine vintage. If you're still conscious after your first round, congratulations. Your stomach, however, is now demanding attention, reminding you that your last meal was mostly air and a handful of barley. It's time to eat, but set your expectations somewhere between survival and culinary mystery. There's no menu, no cheerful waiter, and not a single soul who cares if you're gluten-free. You sidle up to the bar, ask what's left, and brace yourself for whatever steaming concoction lands in front of you. The star of tonight's meal is pottage, the medieval answer to what can we boil for hours without anyone noticing. It's a thick, lumpy stew that's been bubbling away in the same cauldron since the beginning of the week. New ingredients are added daily. Nothing is ever removed, and the result is a savory time capsule, rich in both flavor and mystery. There might be a chunk of turnip, a handful of barley, or a sliver of meat that no one is brave enough to identify. If you do spot meat, give thanks. It's likely rabbit, pigeon, or the unfortunate chicken who lost at hide and seek with the cook. Wild game is a special treat, sometimes delicious, sometimes so aged and seasoned that chewing becomes a competitive sport. Your bowl is rustic, either wood, clay, or something the tavern owner swears is perfectly safe. Spoons are optional. Most patrons arrive with their own knife, so you join the crowd in the medieval tradition of BYO cutlery. If you forgot yours, your fingers will do the job, and no one will even blink. Napkins are unheard of. Instead, you make do with the sleeve of your tunic or a communal rag that's seen more tragedy than most epic poems. Bread is always on offer, though it arrives with a certain gravitas. Imagine a loaf so dense and dark it might double as a doorstop or a weapon should things get lively. If it's soft, it was baked this morning. If it's hard, it's been waiting for its moment since last week. Pair it with a wedge of cheese that carries the aroma of old boots and ambition, and you have a meal fit for a survivor. The cheese may have started developing a personality of its own, and you're not entirely sure it's friendly. Some nights offer a bonus, pickled eggs, salted fish, or the special, which is tavern code for, we have too much of this, and it needs to disappear before it walks away on its own. Flavor is optional. Texture is unpredictable. Still, with the firelight flickering, the noise swirling around you, and something warm in your hands, you find yourself oddly comforted. It's not about fine dining here. It's about eating with the stubborn pride of someone who has made it through another day. As you look around, you realize the real show isn't on the table. It's all around you. The medieval tavern is the original social network, loud, unfiltered, and always on the verge of oversharing. To your left, a farmer, face flushed from too many ales, is retelling the saga of his cow's sideways childbirth for the 5th time. He slaps your shoulder like you're a lifelong friend or a substitute for his usual drinking companion, the pig. Across the room, a hooded stranger sits in shadow, nursing his drink with the slow caution of a man carrying too many secrets. He could be anything: a runaway monk, a bandit, or just terminally shy. Either way, you make a mental note not to ask questions unless you want to wake up missing your shoes. Near the hearth, a battered soldier is holding court, captivating a half-circle of listeners with tales that grow wilder by the minute. His stories feature dragons, Frenchmen, and a talking sword, none of which are even remotely plausible. But no one cares, least of all his audience, who are too busy laughing and refilling his tankard to worry about the truth. Next to him, a merchant, red-faced and sweating, shouts grain prices no one asked for. He jingles his coin pouch with the desperation of a man hoping to be robbed just to spice up the evening. A pair of locals hunch over a battered table, locked in a dice game where the rules are flexible and cheating is expected. One cheats openly. The other lets it slide, saving his outrage for when his mug is empty. Every so often, the game pauses for a heated debate about fairness, which ends, as all things do here, with another round. In the corner, a bard is valiantly strumming a lute missing 3 strings. His voice cracks on the high notes of a love song that sounds suspiciously improvised. No one minds. The mere fact that he's wearing pants and hitting most of the notes puts him ahead of last night's entertainment. Women move through the crowd with the confidence of people who know every secret in the room. Some are staff, others have their own business ventures. They're sharp-eyed, quick-tongued, and absolutely not to be trifled with. They might flirt, laugh, or deliver a well-aimed elbow if you cross a line. Children dart between legs, snatching crusts of bread or the occasional coin. No one tries to stop them. It's simply part of the tavern's rhythm, like the clatter of mugs and the low hum of scheming. Everyone is watching listening and plotting, pretending not to notice the man sleeping, or possibly hiding under the nearest table. The tavern isn't just a place to eat and drink. It's a living, breathing performance. And tonight, you have a starring role. The air is thick with a scent of roasting meat, sweat, and spilled ale, underpinned by a note of ancient wood and distant barnyard. Here, history isn't a distant story. It's alive, messy, and occasionally sticky. Forget the romantic notion of minstrels serenading noble lords. The real soundtrack of a medieval tavern is a glorious cacophony. It starts with the clink of mugs, some slamming in triumph, others in accident, and at least one shattering spectacularly, much to the delight of the crowd. Cheers erupt, punctuated by the low rumble of belly laughter that could shake the rafters. Jokes fly back and forth, most of them unrepeatable or incomprehensible unless you grew up in a field. Laughter booms from a farmer who finds hay-related humor endlessly entertaining. A knight giggles uncontrollably at the word pottage, and a monk nearly loses his mind every time someone says duck. The noise builds in waves. Voices rise, each one determined to outshout the others, arguments about taxes, boastful tales of distant wars, and at least one heated debate about the proper way to milk a goat. The bartender barks orders, swatting at flies with one hand and pouring drinks with the other. A barmaid unleashes a string of colorful threats at a patron who got too handsy, a voice cutting through the din. Someone shouts, "Another round." So often it becomes less a request and more a rallying cry. In the corner, the bard with his half-tuned instrument gamely launches into another song, sometimes about lost love, sometimes about a nobleman who wore his hose backwards, occasionally about a chicken who achieved minor fame. When he starts singing about someone in the room, the reaction is immediate: laughter, applause, or the sharp edge of danger, depending on who's being serenaded. The music blends with the background noise, creating a harmony born of chaos and cheap ale. Every few minutes, something spills: ale, stew, or the occasional pickled egg. Someone lets out a burp that echoes off the beams, earning a round of applause. Someone else, having lost their battle with gravity, tumbles off a bench and continues their story from the floor, insisting it's all part of the plan. In the background, a dog barks, a goat makes its presence known, and no one can quite remember how the goat got inside or whether it belongs to the tavern at all. Chairs scrape across the dirt floor like thunder, punctuating the symphony of the night. The rhythm is anything but peaceful, yet it's strangely comforting, a heartbeat that pulses through every stone and beam. Occasionally, the noise drops to a hush, just long enough for everyone to notice. It lasts 3 seconds before someone, perhaps emboldened by drink or simply feeling generous, unleashes a heroic fart that resets the mood. Laughter erupts. The music resumes, wilder and more off-key than ever. This isn't background noise. It's the living pulse of the tavern, rowdy and relentless, a harmony built from disorder. If you listen closely enough, you can almost make sense of it, a language of clinks and shouts, of laughter and the occasional farm animal. The longer you stay, the more it wraps around you, until you realize this is what history sounds like, not silence, but song, And so, you find yourself swept up in the swirl, one more voice in the endless chorus of the tavern. The food, the drink, the chaos, they're all part of the story, and tonight, that story is yours. Let yourself settle back, the warmth of the fire in your bones, the noise swirling like a lullaby. There's magic here, tucked between spilled stew and half-remembered songs. Soon, the ale will work its way through the crowd, and the stew will begin to settle. The tavern is about to transform, shifting from noisy feast to something even stranger, where dice roll, stories are spun, and unlikely romances bloom. As the tavern sheds its humble skin as an eatery, it reveals its true character, transforming into something far more unpredictable, a medieval casino, only without velvet ropes and with far more shouting. Gambling becomes the entertainment of choice, and everyone, from grizzled mercenaries to shoeless boys clutching borrowed dice, dives straight in. There's no dealer to keep the peace, no pit boss to watch for cheaters, just a battered wooden table, a few weathered copper coins, and the unspoken understanding that someone's dignity will not survive the evening. Dice rule the night, carved from bone, wood, or whatever happened to be lying about. They rattle and tumble across the table like a miniature thunderstorm. Every toss followed by groans, whoops, and at least one accusation of witchcraft, because when the stakes are high, nothing is off the table, not even blaming the supernatural. Nobody really trusts the dice, but everyone keeps rolling them. That's the magic, or the madness, of a medieval gamble. And then there are the cards. If you happen to be in a fancier part of town, you'll find thick hand-painted cards, corners rounded and edges rubbed smooth from years of use. Inevitably, a few are missing, but no one seems to mind. The rules? They drift and change depending on who's explaining them. Sometimes you're chasing the highest number, sometimes you're matching painted symbols, and sometimes you suspect that everyone else is inventing rules as they go. It's poker, but with more slapping and a lot more creative storytelling. Wagers get wild, coin, mugs of ale, a questionable goat, someone else's boots, and, just once, a man's freedom for the night. Spoiler alert, he lost. The regulars are masters of the table, shuffling cards with suspicious speed, rolling dice at a suspiciously slow pace, and smiling in a way that suggests every hand hides a trick. Cheating, of course, isn't just tolerated, it's almost expected. A hidden die here, a marked card there, and a sudden cough from the corner whenever a player gets a little too lucky. If you win big, you're expected to buy a round, or risk finding yourself outside with a mysterious bruise. If you lose spectacularly, you smile, pretend you meant to, and quietly edge your chair closer to the door. Side games break out in every corner. Arm wrestling contests draw a circle of onlookers. Thumb wars escalate into miniature dramas, and the ever-popular challenge of who can drink the most without toppling over ends with one winner. A heap of applause, and one loser, destined to spend the night under the table with a headache that could outlast the next market day. The rules are rarely clear, and the stakes are often absurd, but the energy is infectious. In a medieval tavern, luck isn't just a game, it's a gamble with your purse, your pride, and, occasionally, your trousers. As the night deepens, and the air grows thick with warmth, spilled ale, and the unmistakable tang of sweat. The entertainment changes. Suddenly, the dice are quieter. The cards slip back into sleeves, and the center of attention shifts to a different kind of performance. This is medieval story time, an art form all its own, equal parts drama, music, and sheer bravado. A bard rises from a shadowy corner, running a tongue over the gap where a tooth or three once lived, and plucks at a battered lute that squeaks like a rain-soaked boot. Confidence isn't in short supply. With an exaggerated bow and a dramatic flourish, he launches into a sweeping ballad of heartbreak and heroism, something involving a lovesick knight, a mermaid, and a truly tragic attempt at underwater poetry. No one believes a word of it, but every ear is tuned in. That's the unwritten rule here. Truth is negotiable, but a good story is priceless. Around the tables, the audience takes its cue. Patrons, emboldened by ale and the collective courage of a crowded room, join in, spinning tales of their own. One burly man insists he once bested a bear and lived to drink about it, though the bear may have been stuffed. Another swears he saw a witch transform a cow into a goat right outside his mother's cottage. A third, with a glint in his eye, claims a distant relation to Charlemagne through a cousin's uncle's neighbor. Every story begins with, "You won't believe this, but," and honestly, that's half the fun. No one expects the truth. Everyone wants the entertainment. Boasts morph into ballads, mishaps inflate into legends, and someone inevitably tells a joke so bad it loops back around to being funny. A neighboring patron recites a poem suspiciously similar to one heard in a monastery, while the crowd reacts with everything from applause to bread rolls, depending on their mood and the quality of the performance. If you're lucky, a professional scold or minstrel might be passing through town. These wandering entertainers swap music and stories for coins, a bowl of stew, or a spot by the fire. Their tales are polished, their songs long, and their ability to rile up a crowd truly remarkable. Even they know the golden rule of tavern storytelling. Never let the facts get in the way of a good yarn. In this smoky, firelit room, storytelling isn't just a diversion. It's the glue that binds strangers into friends, rivals into drinking buddies, and even the surliest loners into participants. By midnight, half the tavern is acting out the legend of the one-legged knight who fought off 6 highwaymen with nothing but a soup ladle. You laugh, you cheer, and you forget, just for a moment, that it's all make-believe, because in this room, every liar is a legend as long as the story lands. As the candles burn lower and the mugs keep refilling, a new atmosphere takes hold, one that's softer, a little bolder, and a lot more unpredictable. The bard is halfway through his 3rd song about shepherds and their questionable choices, when suddenly romance is in the air. Welcome to medieval flirting, where subtlety is not only rare, it's considered suspicious. It all starts with a glance, or at least an attempt at one eye squinting earnestly through a haze of mead. A man, perhaps blessed with 2 remaining teeth, leans across the bench and proclaims, "My lady, your beauty blazes brighter than the hearth." She responds in the traditional fashion, by lobbing a crust of bread at his forehead. The entire room erupts in laughter and applause. Elsewhere, would-be romantics try their luck with gentler approaches. They offer refilled mugs, awkward compliments, or, in a moment of true chivalry, an offer to help carry a bowl of stew across the room. Spoiler, it still spills, and probably lands in someone's lap. If you're a woman in the tavern, whether staff, guest, or merchant, you've likely become an expert at fending off a trio of would-be poets, 2 arm wrestlers, and one particularly ambitious man attempting to balance a knife on his nose. Occasionally, one of these dubious tactics works. More often, it results in a black eye, a bruised ego, or an empty purse. For those seeking more than clumsy advances, the tavern is a place of opportunity. Courtesans move gracefully through the crowd, reading faces and coin purses with practiced ease. They know who has money, who has charm, and who will be asleep before making it to the stairs. Their business is quiet, but the consequences are loud, jealous lovers, heated glances, and the kind of drama that can clear a table in seconds. Nothing triggers a tavern brawl faster than a straying hand, a stolen glance, or a husband catching his wife laughing a little too heartily at the bard's latest joke about bishops. Tables overturn, mugs become makeshift weapons, and someone, inevitably, manages to break the same bench for the 3rd time that month. Yet, in the chaos, something genuine finds its footing. A shy baker's daughter and a travelling stonemason share a bowl of stew and a soft laugh. 2 farmers, united by a shared hatred of turnips, discover a surprising kinship. A monk accidentally flirts with a visiting nun, setting off a round of discreet giggles. Love, or something close to it, manages to survive even in the rowdiest corners of the night. In the medieval tavern, romance is part charm, part luck, and part not falling face. First into your soup mid-sentence. You might win a heart, or you might earn a slap. Either way, the night will be unforgettable, or at the very least, you'll hear about your exploits when the sun comes up. Through all of it, the games, the stories, the flirtations, the medieval tavern is a stage for every flavor of human folly and hope. Here, you are not just a spectator but a participant, swept along by the laughter, the wagers, the boasts, and the heartbreaks that fill the air like wood smoke. Every night a new legend is born, and every morning the stories grow just a little taller and a little less believable. Of course, as the hour grows late and the embers fade, you might be tempted to think the night's excitement is winding down. But in a medieval tavern, the end of one adventure is simply the beginning of the next. After all, where there is romance and rivalry, there's bound to be a little chaos just waiting for its cue. Which, as you'll soon see, brings us to the matter of brawls, beds, and what passes for a medieval morning after. It was bound to happen. Maybe someone sloshed their ale over someone's lap. Maybe a pair of dice landed suspiciously, and accusations flew like startled chickens. Maybe 2 burly travellers locked eyes over a single splintered bench, and neither was in a mood to give ground. Or perhaps someone made an ill-advised comment about a mother, whether human, goat, or, in especially creative cases, a steaming bowl of soup. The details hardly matter. What matters is the sudden transformation. One moment, the tavern is a swirl of music, laughter, and clinking mugs, and the next, it's a living storm. A stool arcs through the smoky air. A tankard meets the floor with a dramatic splash. Somewhere a voice bellows, "Hold my bread!" And a figure launches over a bench, arms flailing, possessed by the acrobatic spirit of a tipsy trebuchet. No one is shocked. In fact, the regulars barely pause to look up. In a medieval tavern, a bar brawl is less a mishap and more an expected, almost beloved, feature of the evening's entertainment. Far from the deadly duels of legend, these scraps are mostly farcical. Punches miss by a mile, shoes slip on spilled cider, and someone inevitably lands face first in an unsuspecting stranger's dinner. Hair is yanked, beards are tugged, shirts are reduced to rags. The tavern keeper, always prepared, bellows instructions like a drill sergeant, brandishing a soup ladle in one hand and a battered club in the other. Occasionally, a newcomer will join the melee without a clue what the fight is about, drawn in by the sheer gravitational pull of chaos, while others remain at their tables, wagering on the outcome, cheering or simply nudging their mugs out of harm's way. Weapons are rare. Most folks know better. Draw a blade, and you risk turning a slapstick skirmish into a legendary disaster. No one wants to be exiled from the only establishment serving hot stew and passable ale. So fists fly, tankards are tossed, and, for the most part, bruises are the worst of it. At some ambiguous signal, the fight fizzles out. Someone collapses on the rush-strewn floor and decides it's as good a spot as any to contemplate life. Another slumps against a wall, dazed but oddly content. The brawl ends not with a bang, but with the same abruptness as a candle snuffed by a draught. And, in the strangest twist of all, peace returns as quickly as it vanished. Mugs are topped off, a new song stumbles to life, and laughter bubbles up, even from the fellow dabbing a bloody nose with his sleeve. No lingering grudges, no threats of lawsuits, just fresh stories, new bruises, and the odd moniker, One-Eyed Arnold, Bench-Breaker Bill, or perhaps Bread, Throwing Bertha, making the rounds for the next week. Because here, a good fight is simply another form of entertainment, messy and ridiculous perhaps, but weirdly unifying. If no one ends up permanently worse for wear, it's chalked up as a successful night. And now, with the brawl fading into memory, the bard slumped over his instrument in a puddle of his own dreams, and your stomach full of something resembling stew and cider, with questionable lineage, it's time to address the next medieval challenge, sleep. Or, at least, your best attempt at it. Don't expect a feather bed or scented sheets. This is no royal bedchamber. If your tavern offers lodging, it's probably up a staircase that creaks with every step, past slanted floorboards and ceiling beams that test the resilience of your skull. The sleeping quarters, if you can call them that, are cramped, chilly, and absolutely communal. Privacy is as rare here as a fresh vegetable in winter. You find yourself shoulder to shoulder with strangers from every walk of life, some snoring with the resonance of a cathedral bell, others muttering dream songs in dialects you've never heard. The beds, such as they are, consist of straw-filled mattresses, lumpy, thin, and alive, with what the locals affectionately refer to as companions. You do not undress. You keep your boots on, dagger tucked beneath your pillow, not for comfort, but for the vague reassurance that comes from knowing you're at least as well armed as your neighbor. Blankets are communal, And so, inevitably, are the odors. Garlic, always garlic, seeps into the very fabric of your dreams. For those whose coin purses are light or whose blood alcohol levels are high, there's always the taproom floor. A bench, a shadowy corner, or a patch of hearth-warmed stone becomes a makeshift bed, occasionally shared with a dog that may or may not be a paying guest. In these nocturnal arrangements, you'll likely be stepped on, mistaken for a cushion, or serenaded by the rhythmic snoring of the bard curled up beneath the table, clutching his lute as if it were a long-lost lover. The tavern never truly falls silent. Even as the embers dwindle and the last fights are patched up, there's always a half-heard murmur, the pop and hiss of the fire, or the unmistakable sound of a distant fart echoing with majestic defiance through the rafters. And yet, somehow, you fall asleep. It's not comfortable. It's certainly not hygienic. But it's warm enough, and the presence of others, travellers, merchants, farmers, thieves, offers a kind of rough comfort. The tavern keeper, ever vigilant, keeps watch with one eye open, and the club within reach. The noise becomes its own kind of lullaby, a chorus of coughs, snores, and the quiet, persistent hum of life continuing despite everything. Morning arrives with all the subtlety of an invading army. Pale light seeps through cracked shutters, prodding your eyelids and refusing to be ignored. The tavern has changed overnight. The raucous energy is gone, replaced with a battered quiet. You open one eye to discover someone's boot resting heavily on your ribs. A stranger nearby mutters about sheep taxes in his sleep. Across the room, the bard is sprawled beneath a table, arms wrapped around his instrument, as if bracing for another round. A chicken, origins unknown, struts across the floor, pecking at the night's detritus. No one ever seems to recall when the chicken arrived, or whether it intends to leave. The fire is little more than a pile of sullen coals. A handful of patrons begin to stir, groaning and rubbing their heads like survivors of some epic battle fought entirely within the confines of their own skulls. One man sits up, surveys the room, and promptly lies back down, apparently deciding that consciousness is overrated. The tavern keeper is, of course, already awake. Pots clang, mugs clatter, and straw is swept into new piles. Something is reheating in the main kettle. A scent that's both enticing and ever so slightly threatening wafts through the air. The keeper scans the room, then strikes their ladle against a mug with the grim authority of a church bell rung by a particularly vengeful monk. That's your wake-up call, up or out. Breakfast is a loose interpretation of the word. If you're lucky, there's more pottage, now even thicker than the night before, with the consistency of ambitious glue. Bread is revived over the fire, ale is judiciously diluted, and no one dares complain. Some patrons stumble outside to dunk their heads in a barrel of rainwater, declaring themselves cleansed and fit for another day. You check your pouch, 2 coins and a button survive the night, and, miracle of miracles, your boots are still present. One bears a suspicious bite mark, but you count it as a victory. New faces drift in as the morning unfolds. There are travellers setting out early, workers seeking courage before a day of livestock, taxes, or, if fate is truly cruel, a conversation with their neighbours. The tavern itself stirs like a great beast, waking from uneasy dreams. Stories from the previous night are already being retold, now with twice as many fights, and a ghost summoned by the bard's final, off-key note. Everyone nods with the solemnity of witnesses to history. The night was chaos. The morning is a fog of regret and resilience. And yet, somehow, you find yourself smiling. You have felt the sticky ale under your boots, survived the shouting, the flirting, the dubious stew, and even a flying bench. Through all this, a simple truth emerges. The medieval tavern is so much more than a place to drink. It is the beating heart of the community. In an age with no telephones, no broadsheets, and certainly no social media, this is where news flows. A merchant from distant shores shares tales of foreign lands. A soldier recounts the front lines of war. A bard's song stitches together a dozen strangers, even as the words shift from night to night. Here, connection is the currency. Farmers and craftsmen share a table. Pilgrims break bread with those who may or may not be thieves. Strangers become companions, or at least allies for another round. Social classes blur. Rumors are born and die. Deals are struck over splinters and spilled cider. The tavern is a court, a confessional, and a theatre stage, all rolled into one. You could gain a job, misplace your purse, tie the knot, or start a feud before the sun sets twice. But the tavern offers something else, something that can't be bought in any market or prayed for in any chapel. It gives relief from the cold, from toil, from the relentless seriousness of survival. For a handful of hours, you can bask in the firelight, hear a bad joke, sing a worse song, and for a fleeting moment, forget how hard the world can be. Even if the ale is warm, the bed is itchy, and you suspect the soup contains more bones than broth. The tavern grants you a taste of belonging. You exist among the living. And in an age where winter, sickness, or war could end everything in a blink, that's no small thing. So, when you step into a medieval tavern, you're not just buying a mug of ale. You're purchasing a place in the story, a seat by the fire, a night among strangers who are not quite strangers anymore, and, with luck, a warm spot where the flames still flicker. Before the world of coffee-houses and corner pubs, there was the tavern, loud, unwashed, rowdy, and, in its own way, unforgettable. And as you blink away the last traces of sleep and the morning's grogginess, our historical sleep tour prepares to shift. We're leaving behind smoky rafters and the eternal mystery of the tavern dog, who may, at this very moment, be stealing someone else's breakfast bread. Ahead lies an entirely different kind of enigma, not the raucous heart of a medieval village, but the serene, inscrutable gaze of a queen. Before she became the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, immortalized in a limestone bust with high cheekbones and a gaze frozen in serene confidence, Nefertiti was a woman cloaked in mystery. Settle in, because tonight's sleep tour takes you deep into the shimmering heat of ancient Egypt, where the air hums with incense, distant chants, and the secrets of a queen who steps out of legend, and then, just as quickly, slips away. Picture yourself wandering along the sun-baked avenues of Akhetaten, sandals scuffing against limestone dust, the Nile's green ribbon just visible in the morning haze. The city is new, restless, and unlike anything Egypt has ever seen. And at its heart, standing tall beneath the radiant Aten sun, is Nefertiti, a woman whose very name means the beautiful one has come. But come from where, exactly? That, dear guest, is the first of many riddles tonight. Imagine the gentle clatter of servants at dawn, the ceremonial perfumes wafting through palace corridors, and the low murmur of gossip, because everyone, from the most wrinkled court scribe to the wide-eyed baker's apprentice, is asking the same questions. Is Nefertiti the daughter of the royal advisor? Aye? Or perhaps even Akhenaten's own sister, as some later whisper? Or did she arrive as a foreign princess in a diplomatic exchange, bearing gifts and the scent of faraway myrrh? The records, as always, are stubbornly incomplete, and the old stone walls refuse to give up these early secrets. What is certain is this: she emerges in the annals of history, not with a polite knock, but like a bolt of lightning, brilliant, dazzling, and impossible to ignore. As you shuffle with the other curious onlookers past the palace gates, it becomes clear that Nefertiti is not content to fade into the background, draped in anonymity. She enters Akhenaten's life and Egypt's stage as a partner in revolution. The old gods, with their animal heads and endless rituals, are being ushered quietly but firmly out of the room. In their place, Akhenaten and Nefertiti raise their faces to the golden Aten, the sun disk, whose rays now reach down to bless not just the king, but the queen as well. The priests mutter, the temples echo with emptiness, and the old capital is left behind like a discarded sandal. Yet Nefertiti stands at Akhenaten's side, a living symbol of this audacious new faith. But don't imagine her simply standing in the shadows, hands folded, waiting for instructions. You see her leading processions, pouring offerings of fragrant wine and honey, her arms strong and sure. In the flickering torchlight of the temple, she is depicted not as a passive consort, but as an equal, sometimes even a giant among men, a blue crown gleaming above the heads of lesser mortals. There are scenes carved in stone where she raises her arm to strike down Egypt's enemies, the determination on her face clear enough to be seen even now, centuries later. Her image is everywhere. In fact, in some reliefs, she appears more frequently and more powerfully than Akhenaten himself. It's not just a new religion she's helping to birth, but a new vision of womanhood and power, right here amid the dust and clamor of the ancient world. The city itself seems to shift around her. Akhenaten rises as if conjured from the very earth, avenues aligned so the sun's rays pour directly into the heart of the temples, whitewashed walls reflecting the blinding light, and curious onlookers shading their eyes. You wander through bustling marketplaces where merchants hawk dubious bread and even more suspicious beer, and everywhere you turn, there is Nefertiti's unmistakable profile, long neck, high crown, eyes that seem to follow you, even from the faded paint of a pottery shard. She is not a rumor or a legend, but a living, breathing force. In this city built for the sun, she is its brightest star. Yet, for all her presence, Egypt is uneasy. The old priests, stripped of their wealth and influence, nurse old grudges in the shadows. The people, their routines upended, and their guards replaced, gossip in the cool spaces between mud brick homes, wondering what comes next. Akhenaten, once Amenhotep IV, has changed everything, and Nefertiti, always at his side, is the embodiment of that change. Inside the palace, where the marble floors are cool underfoot and the air smells of lotus and oil, family life is both intimate and extraordinary. Picture a sunlit chamber, its walls painted with scenes of the royal family. Akhenaten and Nefertiti lounging on cushions, soft linen draped over their shoulders. Their daughters, Meritaten, Meketaten, and the others, tumbling at their feet. The art is startlingly tender. Here, the pharaoh kisses his wife. There, Nefertiti cradles a daughter, a face softened by a rare smile. These are not the cold, impersonal icons of earlier dynasties, but moments of warmth and play, frozen in pigment and stone. The sun's rays, rendered as delicate hands, reach down toward the family, blessing each member in turn. You might pause to notice the details overlooked by history books. The laughter of children echoes down the stone corridors. A scribe scratches away at yet another list of offerings, and in the kitchens a cook mutters about the lack of onions in the morning stew. But through it all, Nefertiti's presence is both commanding and gentle, as if she knows every corner of this palace and every soul within it. In the city's great courtyards, Nefertiti is often seen wearing the blue war crown, an honor usually reserved for male pharaohs. She rides through the streets in her chariot, dust swirling behind her wheels, the crowd pressing close for a glimpse. She leads rituals at sunrise, her voice rising above the chorus of priests, her hands steady as she offers bread and incense to the Aten. Sometimes, in the hush before dawn, you can almost hear her prayers drifting above the rooftops, mingling with the distant call of waterbirds along the river. But with power comes peril. Egypt's old order is not so easily erased. The gods of yesterday still linger in the minds of the people, and the priesthood, deprived of its golden privilege, waits for its chance to return. Meanwhile, Nefertiti's own position grows ever more complicated. She is depicted as a co-ruler, sometimes even as the sole figure offering tribute to the sun. Inscriptions refer to her not only as queen, but by the name Nefer-Neferuaten, a title that hints at sovereignty and divine favor. Was she being groomed to rule alone? Was Akhenaten sharing power out of trust, strategy, or necessity? The walls keep their silence, but the speculation never ceases. The revolution they've unleashed reverberates far beyond the palace walls. It touches every level of society, from the sandal maker muttering about the new taxes to the priest's daughter who now learns hymns to Aten instead of Amun. The art changes too. Gone are the stiff, formal poses of earlier dynasties. In their place, you see motion, affection, even humor. Nefertiti laughing, Akhenaten playing with his children, daughters reaching up for a mother's embrace. It's as if the royal family has stepped down from the pedestal of godhood, just enough to let you glimpse the humans beneath the crowns. And yet, in the midst of all this warmth and innovation, a mystery persists. Nefertiti and Akhenaten have 6 daughters, but no confirmed sons. In a culture obsessed with succession, this is more than a curiosity, it's a looming crisis. The court whispers late into the night. Was fate unkind, or was there more to the story? Some suggest that Akhenaten fathered sons by other wives, or, in the more shadowy corners of rumor, by Nefertiti herself, feeding the endless appetite for speculation that history so generously provides. But the only certainty is that Nefertiti's image as a mother, tender, nurturing, fiercely protective, remains central to her legend. As you stroll through the echoing halls at dusk, you see her again, carved in deep relief upon the temple walls. There she is, towering above her enemies, smiting them with a vigor usually reserved for gods and kings. There she stands, arms upraised, the blue crown catching the last golden light, her gaze unyielding. These are not the gestures of a woman content to stand behind her husband. These are the actions of a ruler who knows her own power and is unafraid to use it. Rumors begin to drift through the marketplace and the palace alike. Akhenaten, once so vigorous, now seems gaunt, his features drawn with worry or illness. Some say it's the price of defying the gods. Others blame the stress of governing a country in upheaval. In the soft lamplight, courtiers speculate that Nefertiti is quietly taking on more responsibility, steering the ship of state as her husband falters. There are whispers that she is not just queen, but acting as pharaoh in all but name. The blue crown fits her well, after all. But then, as quickly as she had appeared, the record begins to blur. The stone-carved scenes grow fewer. The inscriptions become vague and silent. One moment, Nefertiti is everywhere, her likeness dazzling on temple walls, her name ringing in daily hymns. The next, she is gone. No grand farewell, no royal tomb unveiled for the ages. Just a sudden, bewildering absence, as if the Aten itself had blinked and history had looked away. So as you linger in the twilight of Akhenaten, the scents of lotus and sun-warmed stones swirling in the evening breeze, you're left with 1,000 questions and no easy answers. Did Nefertiti die young, struck down by fate or by palace intrigue? Did she fall from power, exiled and erased by enemies old and new? Or was she poised, in those final, silent years, to become something greater than queen, a living goddess, a ruler in her own right, a legend that no stone could contain? It is here, in the hush between fact and myth, that Nefertiti's story truly comes alive, and where her ghost lingers, inviting you to wonder, to question, and to dream of what might have been. But the story doesn't end with her rise. In fact, the greatest mystery is still to come. One day, Nefertiti was everywhere, etched into walls, praised in hymns, ruling alongside a revolutionary pharaoh. And then, just like that, she was gone. In our next chapter, we'll follow the trail of her disappearance and explore why her legacy still dazzles and haunts us thousands of years later. Tonight, as your personal historical sleep concierge, I invite you to slip off your sandals and step quietly into the golden dusk of ancient Egypt, where the scent of incense mixes with the ever-present dust and the Nile murmurs just out of sight. You find yourself in the city of Akhenaten, a place that was once the heartbeat of a revolution. Here, Queen Nefertiti's presence lingers in every corner. She's carved in relief, painted in vibrant color, her regal profile presiding over a sea of lotus blossoms and sycophantic courtiers. Her name echoes in hymns carried on the wind, her presence nearly as constant as the sun god, Aten himself. And then, just as you begin to feel at home beneath her painted gaze, she vanishes, quicker than a mirage dissolving under a desert sun. There's no warning, no royal decree, not a single official scroll to say, Nefertiti has left the building. Around the 12th year of Akhenaten's 17-year experiment with monotheism, the records simply fall silent. You scan the walls. The queen is gone from the processions. Her name, once chiseled with such fanfare, is now conspicuously absent. Even the artists, who love to immortalize her distinctive features, seem to have dropped their brushes in confusion. No funerary texts, no mourning lamentations, no golden tomb to proclaim her passage to the afterlife. For a woman who had been so dazzlingly visible, her absence is almost too loud to bear. Let's pause here together, you and I. The air is heavy with questions. What on earth or under it happened to Nefertiti? Was she spirited away by palace intrigue, or did something more ordinary befall her? The simplest theory, and perhaps the most quietly heartbreaking, is that she died. Childbirth, even in the scented chambers of royalty, was perilous business. Scribes note that her second daughter, Meketaten, also disappears from the records at this time. Some whisper about a double tragedy, a mother and daughter lost within the same shroud of silence. Yet even this explanation feels thin. Where is the parade of grief, the monumental tomb, the temple rites fit for a living goddess? Egypt did not do subtle when it came to death, especially for someone like Nefertiti. So, we consider the alternative, and here the shadows grow longer. Perhaps Nefertiti's disappearance was not about death, but about politics. Imagine the royal court, its corridors thick with murmured rumors, and the occasional waft of something less pleasant, possibly the leftover fish from yesterday's banquet. Akhenaten, more and more isolated by his radical reforms, may have pushed Nefertiti aside. Maybe he favored another consort. Maybe she herself fell out of favor, her influence eroded by the very revolution she helped spark. A new name flickers into the record like a half-remembered dream, Smenkare. This enigmatic figure emerges, briefly shining in the annals of succession. Was he a male heir, a half-brother, or, here's where things get deliciously complicated, was Smenkare actually Nefertiti in disguise? Some scholars, peering through the fog of time, note that another ruler appears under the name Neferneferuaten. The inscriptions for this ruler use feminine grammar, and she references Akhenaten as her beloved husband. It's a tantalizing puzzle piece. If it was Nefertiti, she didn't vanish at all. She transformed, slipping seamlessly into the rarest role of all, female pharaoh, sovereign in her own right. Picture her now, not as a queen consort, but as a king in her own regalia, standing beneath the high sun, perhaps frowning at the latest batch of temple bread, still as hard as ever. Yet even this theory is dust on the wind. Neferneferuaten's reign, if it was Nefertiti's, ends abruptly. The trail goes cold, and then, out of the shifting sands, a child king steps forward Tutankhaten, soon to be Tutankhamun. The new regime wastes no time. Akhenaten's reforms are reversed, the old gods are restored, and the city of Akhetaten is abandoned, left to the jackals and the occasional wandering goat, who's just happy to find a fresh patch of reeds. If Nefertiti'd rule alone, it was as a shadow her presence felt, but her name erased, like a signature washed from papyrus. The records are maddeningly coy, leaving us with only hints and half-carved cartouches. She is the missing queen, the ghost at the royal feast. And just like that, the most powerful woman in Egypt is gone. Her fate a riddle, her story unfinished. Yet, don't drift off just yet. Her legacy is only beginning to take shape. As the dust settles over Akhetaten, the world's attention shifts to the boy king, Tutankhamun. His name will one day fill museums and inspire countless documentaries with overly dramatic music. But here's the twist. Who was his mother? The papyrus is frustratingly blank. Akhenaten is almost certainly the father, but the identity of Tutankhamun's mother remains an enigma wrapped in linen. Some scholars argue Nefertiti was his stepmother, a steady hand guiding the young king through the stormy waters of restoration. Others believe she was his biological mother, pointing to the art and timing that place. Tutankhamun as a young child during Nefertiti's final, flickering appearances. If this is true, it would explain the smoothness of his early reign, the way the machinery of state seemed to turn with invisible help, as if someone very experienced was working quietly in the background, perhaps rolling her eyes at the new temple's architectural choices. This is where things get curiouser and curiouser. Tutankhamun was 9 when he took the throne, a delightful age for learning to write one's name, but not quite up to the task of restoring a religious empire. Someone was clearly steering the ship. Was it Nefertiti ruling from the shadows? Or was it the high priest, Ai, who may have been her father, or at least her co-conspirator, in the grand project of undoing Akhenaten's legacy? Perhaps it was both, working side by side, their sandals squeaking softly on the palace floors as they plotted Egypt's return to the old gods. There's one piece of evidence that refuses to be ignored, a golden shrine found in Tutankhamun's tomb. On its side, a woman anoints the young king. Her features are strikingly familiar, those high cheekbones, that serene gaze. Could it be Nefertiti, still at the heart of power? Her presence felt even in the boy king's most private moments? If so, she never really left. She simply moved into the shadows, guiding history with an invisible hand. But we have no tomb, no mummy, no grand funerary mask to confirm any of this. Egypt, so meticulous about the afterlife, seems to have lost track of one of its greatest queens. It's as if Nefertiti evaporated, her memory deliberately scrubbed from the temples, her name omitted from the king lists. Someone, or perhaps several someones, wanted to erase her, to make it seem as though she never ruled at all. The irony is almost too perfect. In trying to bury her, history made her immortal. Tutankhamun's glittering tomb would one day resurrect Nefertiti's image. In searching for a boy king, the world stumbled upon his mysterious mother. For a woman who stood at the epicenter of Egypt's most radical era, queen, priestess, possible pharaoh, there is not a single confirmed tomb. no inscription to whisper her final words, no ornate sarcophagus to cradle her journey to the duat. It's as though she has been swept away by the wind, an unfinished song echoing across the sands. And this, dear guest, is the mystery that has haunted Egyptologists for over a century. In a land obsessed with the afterlife, where even minor officials got elaborate burials with instructions for their souls, how could the queen whose face launched 1,000 statues simply disappear? Theories multiply like stray cats in the alleys of Thebes. Some suggest she was buried hastily, her radical legacy making her dangerous to the new regime. Perhaps her tomb was dismantled, her name defaced, swept away in the feverish rush to restore the old faith. Vengeance, it seems, was often written in stone. But another, more tantalizing possibility remains. Maybe her tomb was never lost at all. Maybe it lies just out of reach, hidden behind a false wall in the Valley of the Kings. In 2015, radar scans of Tutankhamun's tomb hinted at hidden chambers, secrets sealed just inches away from the world's most famous burial. Was Nefertiti sleeping there, behind a wall of gold and silence? For a moment, the archaeological world held its breath. But as with so many things in Egypt, certainty proved elusive. The scans were inconclusive. Excavations slowed. The sands reclaimed their secrets, and Nefertiti faded once again into legend. Yet her absence remains thunderous. We have her likeness, dozens, maybe hundreds of images. Her bust in Berlin gazing serenely across museum glass, as if she knows something we never will. Every year, new excavations turn up fresh whispers. Could a sealed chamber finally reveal her fate? Could a single cartouche, buried under centuries of sand and bureaucracy, spell her true name? Or is she destined to remain Egypt's eternal riddle, the queen who haunts us with her silence? If history tried to bury her, it failed spectacularly. Because the search for Nefertiti never truly ended, it only deepened, drawing us closer to the heart of her mystery, night after night. And as you settle deeper into your linen-wrapped dreams, consider this. If her tomb was never found and her body never identified, why do we still remember Nefertiti? That's a story for the next leg of our journey, where the mystery becomes legacy and the legend refuses to fade. Let's settle in, guest, as the desert cools and the stars settle over Egypt's ancient sands, with 1,000 years between you and her. You might wonder why the world still whispers Nefertiti's name into the twilight. Her tomb remains hidden, her bones never gently cradled by archaeologists. Yet her story lingers more persistent than the Nile itself. The answer flickers to life in a softly lit hall in Berlin, behind immaculate glass, where centuries of breathless visitors pause before a single face. Here, under the hush of the Neues Museum, stands the painted limestone bust of Nefertiti, a vision so arresting that even the dust motes seem to freeze mid-drift. You're drawn in, unable to look away. Her long neck arches with impossible grace. Her blue crown rises regal and strange. Her features are so sculpted, so symmetrical, that you almost expect her to blink. Yet there's one eye, unfinished, blank, a detail that invites speculation. Was it left incomplete by accident, or as some cryptic gesture? Or did the sculptor simply run out of both time and patience, as so many artists do? This bust, unearthed in 1912 by the German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt, among the crumbling ruins of the sculptor Thutmose's workshop at Amarna, changed everything. Imagine Borchardt's hands trembling as he swept away the last crust of centuries, and saw that face staring up, serene and untouched. In his own diary he wrote, "No use describing it, you have to see it." And truly, words fail in her presence. She is beauty distilled into silence, and silence made immortal. But the story doesn't end with her unveiling. It only grows more tangled. The bust now lives in Berlin, a guest who has overstayed her welcome, according to many Egyptians. She was spirited away in an era when antiquities slipped from one continent to another with little more than a nod and a handshake. Egypt has pleaded for her return for decades, insisting she belongs beneath the same sun that once gilded her skin. Germany, however, has always refused. They say she is too fragile, a delicate ambassador who might not survive the journey. Others mutter that it's really about pride, after all, who would willingly part with their own Mona Lisa. Every day the debate simmers. Is it about preservation or about prestige? Let's pause in front of her glass case, where tourists shuffle by, some awestruck, others craning for the perfect selfie. Her presence radiates something beyond mere beauty. There's a challenge in her gaze, a quiet certainty. She appears as someone who could keep a secret or issue a command with equal ease. This isn't just the face of a royal consort. This is the portrait of a woman who shaped the fate of an empire, perhaps even as its ruler. It's remarkable, isn't it, how a single sculpture, silent, motionless, can resurrect a person lost to time. Nefertiti's tomb may be elusive, her end unknown, but through this bust she has achieved a kind of immortality that even the pharaohs might envy. Not sealed in gold, not wrapped in linen, but held in the world's collective memory. The statue's stillness is deceptive. Inside its silence 1,000 stories swirl. But who, truly, was Nefertiti? Here, the sands of certainty shift beneath your feet. Was she a goddess incarnate, a living bridge between mortal and divine? Was she a political architect, the real power behind Akhenaten's throne? Some imagine her as a tragic figure, caught in the whirlwind of religious revolution. Others see a strategist, moving through chaos with poise and calculation. The myths multiply with every generation. What we do know is intriguing. Nefertiti was not content to be a shadow beside the king. Her likeness appears in scenes of ceremony, in the thick of battle, even presiding over sacred rites. She is not only present, she is central, her image placed with the same reverence as a pharaoh's. In a world built on the authority of men, she claimed a place in the sun, not by raging against the rules, but by embodying them so completely that she rewrote them. She stood at the heart of one of history's boldest experiments. When Akhenaten cast aside the old gods for a single sun, Nefertiti became the living face of this new faith, the radiant intermediary between Aten above and the people below. She did not merely serve, she personified. She was the ideal, the unattainable made flesh. Yet, after her mysterious disappearance, her memory was swept away in a tide of revenge. The backlash that toppled Akhenaten's revolution tried to erase Nefertiti as well. Statues were shattered, names chiseled out. Her role was buried beneath layers of official forgetting. But, as you and I both know, history has a peculiar appetite for resurrection. 3,000 years later, her name persists, whispered in galleries, argued over in conferences, invoked in novels and documentaries. Why does her story continue to haunt us, even as so many others have faded to dust? Perhaps it's because myth endures where fact fails. When a woman becomes both an icon and an enigma, she slips into a realm where time cannot bind her. Sometimes questions echo louder than answers. And maybe, just maybe, that was her plan all along. To be remembered, not dissected, admired, not explained. To live on, not enclosed by a tomb, but liberated by mystery. The centuries have not dulled her allure. If anything, the less we know, the more we yearn to fill the blanks. Is it simply her beauty? We've seen countless faces, statues, paintings, portraits, but none have captivated quite like this. Perhaps it's that deliberate void, the spaces where history hiccups and leaves us guessing. It's as if she left behind a puzzle, not for her contemporaries, but for us, daring us to try to understand, knowing we never truly will. She has become a mirror for every era's imagination. In the early 20th century, she was cast as the exotic, silent queen. Later, as feminism gathered force, she emerged as a symbol of female power lost to the ages. Now, she's imagined as a style icon, a ruler in her own right, even a proto-pharaoh. Her story has lived more lives in our minds than she ever did in the flesh. And isn't that the most fitting afterlife? For the ancient Egyptians, immortality was not simply a matter of mummification. It was memory. If your name was spoken, your face seen, your tale retold, you lived. Nefertiti has achieved that and more. Her name drifts across continents. Her image is instantly recognizable. Her story, no matter how fractured, still commands wonder. Her greatest legacy isn't locked away in a tomb, but in the restless curiosity she ignites. Perhaps that was her final, subtlest act of power. Not merely to command an empire, not just to rewrite the rules of faith, not even to outlast the pharaohs, but to become timeless. Nefertiti, the beautiful one who came, never truly left. She resides here, in our questions, in our awe, in that peculiar ache of wanting to know more about the women history tried to forget. She endures not in gold, not in glory, but in the unending act of being searched for. And what, after all, could be more immortal than that? So as the stars gather above the Nile and the desert wind brushes against the museum's glass, let's leave Nefertiti in her perpetual dusk, half seen, half imagined, entirely unforgettable. Her story invites us onward, because wherever the shadows of history lengthen, there are mysteries waiting to be explored. And speaking of mysteries, our journey now drifts eastward, toward terraced hills, where land and legend spiral together. China, where the wind hums through bamboo groves and a dragon lies coiled. Tonight, as your sleep concierge, I invite you to slip quietly into the mists of southern China, where the clouds settle low against the mountains and the wind threads through bamboo, humming a tune that even the oldest pines struggle to remember. In this landscape, something extraordinary coils along the slopes. A dragon. Not the snarling, fire-breathing kind you find painted on festival banners or lurking in the pages of old legends. No, this dragon is made entirely of earth, water, and the memory of countless hands working in patience. Locals call it the dragon's backbone, but its true name is Longji. The rice terraces that ripple across the mountainsides like the scales of a sleeping beast, shimmering with every drop of water and every stalk of green. From a distance, the terraces look like a creature at rest, its spine undulating across the hills, each vertebrae a perfectly carved curve rising and falling with the land's ancient rhythm. Step closer though, yes? Let's walk with slow, careful steps, because in Longji, the land is always slick with the memory of rain, and you'll hear something more alive than legend. Water slips through narrow channels in a constant whispering song. Seedlings quiver in the mountain breeze, and at dawn, an ethereal mist wraps the terraces, curling over the ridges like the dragon's breath, warming the world awake. Sleepy, perhaps, but never quite still. But how did this dragon come to be? The story begins more than 700 years ago, when the ancestors of the Zhuang and Yao people, communities with roots as deep as the mountain pines, looked at these steep, stubborn slopes and saw neither defeat nor futility, but a challenge worthy of generations. Flat land was scarce, a rare and precious thing, already claimed by others and jealously guarded. There were no machines, no iron plows, just stone tools, bamboo baskets, and the kind of resolve that only comes from necessity. The people looked at the mountain and asked, with a certain pragmatic stubbornness, "How do we feed ourselves here?" The answer was not quick or easy. It took centuries of trial and error, of aching backs and muddy feet, for the mountain to yield. With only primitive tools, they began the slow work, carving earth, stacking stones, carrying baskets of soil and rubble along treacherous paths. Inch by inch, year by year, terraces began to appear, narrow, horizontal platforms cut into the hillsides and held in place by walls of stone, each one built by hand and hope. Every layer was measured not with rulers, but by the shared intuition of generations. The mountain did not surrender. It simply began to trust. This was more than just agriculture. This was a dialogue. The people listened to the wind, watched the way water ran after the rain, learned to coax the slope rather than conquer it. The result is a landscape that moves with the mountain, never against it. Rainfall that once dashed heedlessly toward the valley is now caught, tamed, and guided along the dragon's spine. Slope becomes sustenance, and rice, fragile, demanding, yet utterly essential, finds a home where gravity once reigned. The terraces shimmer with new life, each curve a testament to patience, ingenuity, and the slow, unhurried negotiation between human and earth. If you walk the ridges at dawn, the terraces unfurl beneath your feet like a great living mirror. The water, pooled in each paddy, reflects the sky so perfectly that on a clear morning The clouds seem to float both above and below. And even the sun, if it's feeling generous, will double itself in the glassy fields. It's easy to imagine that the mountain itself is dreaming, and you are walking on the very edge of that dream, careful not to wake it too quickly. But don't be fooled by the serenity. Building these terraces took more than patience. It required an understanding of water almost mystical in its precision. At the mountain top, rainwater and cool mountain springs are gathered into narrow ditches and earthen canals, the veins of the dragon. Gravity does the work of 1,000 pumps, carrying water downward from one tier to the next. Each terrace must be perfectly level, or risk disaster. Too steep and the water rushes past, too flat and it stagnates, drowning the rice or breeding a legion of mosquitoes eager to test your resolve. Control comes through subtle, hand-built gates, simple slabs of wood or stone, adjusted by feel and habit. Each morning, villagers walk the ridges, checking, listening to the soft gurgle of water, adjusting the flow with a flick of the wrist and a squint at the sky. It is less like farming, more like conducting an orchestra in which every note must land, or the whole mountain falls out of tune. Even now, in the age of drones and digital everything, this system survives. There is no roar of engines, no fluorescent safety vests, just the quiet shuffle of feet and the slap of mud against straw sandals. The old ways endure, not out of stubbornness, but because they work. The terraces still feed villages, still resist the floods and droughts that batter the valleys below. Each curve, each channel, each drop of water is a living fingerprint, pressed deep into the mountain by hands that have never forgotten what the soil can give and what it can take away. But the terraces do more than feed bodies. They feed the imagination. To the people of Longji, the terraces are not just fields. They are a living myth, a dragon that must be honored, cared for, and never woken in anger. In the evenings, as the sun settles low and the water glows with gold, stories rise with the mist. Elders talk of ancestors who tamed the mountain, of spirits who dwell in the ridges, of years when the dragon slept lightly, and years when it stirred and sent storms rolling down the slopes. Children listen, eyes wide, searching the terraces for signs. Was that the dragon's tail in the curve of the highest ridge? Was that its breath in the cold, rolling fog? Day by day, season by season, the dragon's backbone survives because its caretakers understand the language of patience. The terraces are repaired by hand after every heavy rain. Stones are replaced, earth is pressed back into place, channels are cleared of silt and debris. It is a cycle as old as memory. The planting, the tending, the harvest, the rest. Time here is measured not in hours or even days, but in the slow, deliberate rhythm of water and work. Spring comes with the first trickle of meltwater, filling the paddies until they gleam like jade. Summer thickens the water with the green of growing rice. Autumn gilds the terraces with gold, and winter brings a hush, snow dusting the ridges, the dragon sleeping under a blanket of frost. And planting, oh planting, is a ritual. There are no machines for this, no shortcuts or clever hacks. Every seedling is transplanted by hand. At dawn, farmers step into the flooded fields, their straw hats casting long shadows over the glassy water. With careful fingers, they press each stalk into the mud, line by line, row by row. The rhythm is meditative, bend, reach, press, repeat, a slow dance of bone and muscle and memory. Children follow, splashing in the shallows, learning by doing, correcting their spacing by eye and by the gentle, exasperated murmurs of their elders. Sometimes the only sign that you're not in a painting is the squelch of mud between your toes and the faint suspicion that, somewhere nearby, a duck is plotting to steal your lunch. Planting is not just work, it is ceremony. Offerings are made to the mountain spirits. Songs are sung in dialects that echo off the stone walls. And in some villages, the oldest among them scatter the first handful of seedlings as a blessing. With every field planted, a promise is made to the land, to the ancestors, to the children yet to come, and perhaps most of all, to the dragon itself, that ancient spirit of endurance and hope. There is no rush here. No one chases the dragon, no one races the mountain. Instead, everything unfolds at the pace of patience, in a rhythm that feels older than time itself. Each green shoot rising from the water is a quiet act of defiance against hunger, against haste, against the forgetfulness of the world beyond these hills. The terraces grow more than rice. They grow hope, one seed at a time, one season after another, as the dragon breathes and the future is planted. To stand on these terraces, to feel the cool wind and the soft warmth of the sun, is to step into a world where human endurance leaves its mark, not in monuments or machines, but in the living shape of the earth itself. There are no illusions here, no grand pronouncements or marble statues, only the gentle, persistent reminder that what patience builds, patience preserves. The dragon's backbone rises, layer by layer, dream by dream, and invites you to walk among its scales, to listen to its breath, to remember that harmony, true, enduring harmony, can only be carved by time, by care, and by countless calloused hands. And as dusk settles, the dragon rests, its body gleaming in the last light, its breath a gentle mist curling among the ridges. The terraces remain quietly alive, waiting for the next turn of the season, for the next hand to press a seed into waiting earth. It is here, in these quiet moments, that the true magic of Longji endures, not in legend, but in life, in every drop of water, every stone placed just so, every whispered promise passed from one season to the next. Ahead, your sleep tour will wind deeper into this mountain tapestry, following the curves of the dragon's back to the villages scattered along the ridges. For here, nestled in the crooks of the terraces, are the heartbeats of the dragon's backbone, where culture, legend, and the seasonal rhythms of life continue their ancient dance. Let me guide you now, guest, into the very heart of the dragon's backbone, villages that cling like ancient memories to every fold and curve of the Longji rice terraces. You find yourself winding along narrow ridges, the path sometimes vanishing into mist, only to reappear with the flick of a breeze. Below, the terraces ripple outward, and nestled in their crooks are clusters of timber houses, Pingan, Dazai, Jinkeng, villages with names as old as the stones beneath your feet. These places are not just dots on a map. They are living, breathing archives of tradition, each one a testament to endurance, adaptation, and the quiet stubbornness of mountain life. The houses here are built from dark, seasoned wood, lifted above the ground on sturdy stilts that seem to defy both gravity and the relentless monsoon rains. Their slanted roofs, the color of old charcoal, echo the undulating lines of the terraces themselves. From a distance, the villages appear almost to float, wooden lanterns set adrift on a sea of green, bobbing gently on the dragon's back. Step inside, and you're wrapped in a warmth that has nothing to do with electricity. Family fills each room. Generations share space, meals, laughter, and sometimes arguments over who left the rice wine open. The air is thick with the scent of bamboo smoke and simmering broth. Rice wine, sharp and sweet, drifts from gourd cups as elders swap stories by the hearth. You hear the soft thump of a mortar as someone pounds sticky rice for tomorrow's breakfast, and the creak of a loom somewhere upstairs weaving indigo-dyed cloth that will be worn at the next festival. Outside, a rooster crows with more confidence than accuracy, and chickens dart between the stilts, searching for lost fortunes, mostly in the form of stray grains of rice. Here, the mountains are home to the Zhuang and Red Yao peoples, each with their own language, customs, and legends. You recognize the Red Yao women instantly by their extraordinary hair, jet black, never cut since childhood, coiled high atop their heads in elaborate knots. Sometimes, at the riverbank, you catch a glimpse of this hair unfurling like a ribbon of midnight silk, falling nearly to the ground as they wash it with water and a secret mixture of rice husks. It's a sight so graceful, you wonder if you've stumbled into a folk tale by accident. Despite the slow creep of modernization, electric wires tracing the mountains, smartphones lighting up festival nights, traditions here are stitched tightly into daily life. Clothes are still spun and dyed by hand, the deep blue of indigo staining the fingers of those who work the looms. Music doesn't come from speakers, but from reed pipes and the steady pulse of bronze drums, especially during festivals when the whole village gathers to mark weddings, harvests, or simply the turn of the season. If you're lucky, you'll witness a wedding procession, the dancers' footsteps echoing the rhythm of the terraces themselves, laughter spilling down the slopes like water after rain. Hospitality in these villages is not something you book online or review afterward. It's as natural as drawing a breath. A visitor is greeted with tea brewed from mountain leaves, rice wine poured into carved gourds, and stories passed down from elders whose memories stretch further than the oldest terrace. You're invited to sit by the fire, to taste wild greens foraged that morning, and to hear tales of dragons sleeping in the mist, ancestors who first coaxed the hills into steps, and spirits who still watch from the forests. The villagers speak softly about the past, not as something lost, but as something alive and present, walking the terraces beside them. Even as visitors arrive from distant places and the world grows smaller, the pulse of these villages remains steady. You can sense it in the way a grandmother bends to tie her granddaughter's sash, in the careful repair of an old timber wall, in the silent, respectful nods exchanged at sunrise. The rice still grows. The rituals still come with each season, and the terraces, like their people, persist by absorbing change rather than resisting it, layer by careful layer, water finding its way from one level to the next. Within these coils of the dragon's spine, life unfolds slowly, intentionally. Here, time is not something to be managed or tamed, but something to live alongside. Memories echo in every bamboo grove, every stone path. To walk among these terraces, guest, is to walk through living legend. The mountains are not just earth and rock. They are storied beings, shaped by gods and guarded by spirits, their tales carried on the wind and sung during the planting of rice. The most cherished legend here is of the sleeping dragon, its body winding along the ridges, its scales rising and falling in the form of terraces. Villagers believe that when the valley is swaddled in mist, the dragon stirs in its slumber, breathing clouds across the slopes. On mornings when the fog rolls in, you might hear someone joke quietly so as not to disturb the spirits that the dragon is dreaming again. There are other stories too, tales of famine long ago, when ancestors hiked the mountain to pray for rain. The gods, so moved by their devotion, sent not only water, but wisdom. Carve the hills into steps, and rice will grow. The people obeyed, and the dragon appeared, guiding their hands. Since then, respect for the mountain is woven into every action. No shouting in the fields, no cutting of trees without a whisper of gratitude. Even today, these beliefs linger in the smallest of rituals. A few drops of rice wine poured into the earth before the year's first planting. A moment of silence before water is released into the fields. No one asks whether you believe. Here, tradition is as natural as tying your shoes. Children learn these stories by heart, not as bedtime fairy tales, but as truths rooted in the land. To scoff at the dragon is to risk a poor harvest. To offend the mountain spirits could invite a season of drought or flood. The water that feeds the terraces is sacred too. Some farmers still murmur prayers as they open the gates, offering a splash of wine to the unseen guardians of spring and rain. This isn't superstition exactly. It's a gentle negotiation with fate, a way of living in balance with land that can give as much as it takes. Whether you're a skeptic or a secret believer, there's something undeniably sacred about the air here. Maybe it's the hush that settles over the terraces at dawn. Maybe it's the feeling, impossible to explain, that you're walking through a story written in stone and water, not ink. The terraces are more than human handiwork. They're a kind of living manuscript, a story whose next chapter is always unfolding. For centuries, this dragon's backbone was a secret known only to the mountains and those who called them home. The outside world was distant, its noise muffled by the folds of the hills. But no place, however sacred, remains untouched forever. Roads appeared, then wires. Tourists arrived, smartphones in hand, and the terraces had to answer a question they'd never faced. How do you survive in a world that wants to watch, record, and perhaps even remake you? At first, there was fear. Would the mountain be carved up, its wood traded for concrete? Would tradition become a costume, worn only for show? But the villagers of Longji did what they've always done. They endured and they adapted, not by erasing their past, but by threading the present carefully into it. Instead of grand hotels, families opened their homes. You, the honored guest, are invited not to spectate, but to share. To sleep in a wooden bed and wake to the sound of roosters, to eat sticky rice steamed in bamboo, to feel the creak of old timber underfoot. This hospitality isn't curated for Instagram. It's lived, honest, sometimes awkward, always real. Farming continues as it always has. Each season, villagers wade into the flooded terraces, planting by hand, harvesting with sickles that have outlived generations. Children might rush off to school in the morning, but by dusk they're back in the fields, helping their parents and grandparents. Tourism brings money, yes, but rice brings life. Both are threads in the same tapestry. Some young people leave for the city, drawn by neon lights and smoother roads. Yet many return, pulled by something deeper than nostalgia, a longing for the sound of water slipping through ancient channels, for the sight of stars mirrored in silent paddies, for the patient wisdom of mountains that change with every season. Festivals have grown louder. Microphones now compete with drums. Signs in Mandarin and English nestle alongside sacred springs. Yet, beneath the surface, the rituals remain. Offerings are made. Elders still lead the songs. The dragon's backbone bends, but does not break. The terraces survive not by freezing themselves in time, but by breathing with it, flexing and adapting, always in motion. In a world where tradition is often trampled in the rush for progress, Longji proves that the old ways can walk beside the new, so long as both move gently. The terraces, like the dragon, are never the same place twice. With each passing season, their colors and moods shift, as if the mountain is shedding one skin for another. While cities may change in years, here the landscape transforms in weeks, draped in light, in silence, in rhythm. To spend a year among these terraces is to witness the mountain's breath. Spring arrives, and the terraces fill with water, becoming mirrors for the clouds and sky. You can walk through the fields and see the heavens reflected beneath your feet, a sensation so surreal you half expect to meet your own reflection coming the other way, perhaps holding a cup of that questionable rice wine. The fields look empty, but under the surface, the season stirs with life, seeds waking from their winter sleep. Summer brings an eruption of green. Rice shoots thrust upward, blanketing the terraces in a lush, unbroken wave of emerald. The air is thick and warm. Frogs sing from every paddy, and farmers, knee-deep in water, move slowly through the heat, their straw hats bobbing like tiny boats on a gentle sea. The rhythm of work is steady, the days long and humming with life. Autumn is the golden climax, harvest time. The terraces blaze with ripe grain, the hillsides catching the sun in 1,000 flickers of gold. The wind ripples through the rice, and the villages pulse with celebration. Drums echo, voices rise in song, and families gather for feasts of sticky rice and wild greens. The dragon, fully awake, offers its bounty with a kind of quiet pride. Winter hushes the mountain. The terrace is empty, the water drains away, and sometimes a soft layer of snow settles on the steps, turning the dragon's scales to silver. Frost clings to the wooden walls, and the only sound is the wind threading through the empty fields. Silence returns, and the dragon sleeps again, gathering strength for the turning of the year. Each season leaves its own mark, a poem written in water, rice, silence, and song. Spring reflects, summer grows, autumn feeds, winter rests. The beauty of Longji lies not just in the shape of its hills, but in the cycle that repeats, gentle and unbroken, year after year. Photographers chase the perfect moment, but the terraces never stand still for long. They move, they breathe, they remind us that beauty is found not in stasis, but in rhythm, an unending dance of change and return. And so, guest, as you prepare to leave the dragon's coils behind, you carry with you the quiet lesson of the terraces. To endure is not to resist the world, but to absorb it, layer by careful layer, season by patient season, always remembering, always adapting. The dragon's backbone turns again, not with roar or fire, but with the slow, steady pulse of water, grain, and wind. In the end, the terraces are more than fields. And as we slip from the green slopes of Longji, it's time to let the mountain's rhythm fade and look outward, toward mysteries that sleep beneath the sand and water of distant lands, where another legend, half buried and half whispered, waits to challenge everything we think we know about the ancient world. You find yourself standing not on the sun-baked plateau of Giza, but knee-deep in the hush of marshland, where the Nile's ancient fingers still curl through reed and mud. The pyramids, those stone peaks that have drawn eyes and pilgrims for centuries, now hover at your back, ghostly and remote, as you wade toward a very different secret, a secret that is neither roped off nor explained by guides in crisp linen shirts. Here, in the shallows near Abu Ra'ash, the air is thick with the earthy tang of wet silt and the distant buzz of insects. The water is cool and sly around your ankles. There are no ticket booths, no selfie sticks, just a hush so complete you can hear the occasional plop of a frog or the slow ripple of a fish beneath the surface. You inhale, and even the scent is heavy with mystery, brackish, ancient, with a whisper of something mineral, something old enough to have forgotten its own name. Most travellers to Egypt never glance down. They crane their necks at the pyramids, or blink into the sun at the monumental gaze of the standing Sphinx. But beneath the surface, beneath centuries of river mud and silt, whispers tell of a different guardian. Local fishermen, their faces weathered by years and sun, pass the tale in low voices as they work tangled nets along the water's edge. They speak of a shape resting just out of sight, a broad, symmetrical back too smooth to be accident, too feline to be coincidence. Some claim when the Nile shrinks back in dry seasons, a stone haunch breaches the water, slick with mud and impossible to ignore. There, in the half-light, you might just glimpse the edge of a paw, or the faint groove of a shoulder, carved so long ago its maker's name has dissolved into river mist. To stand here among the reeds is to feel the weight of unasked questions. There are no velvet ropes, no signs in multiple languages, no lines of buses idling in the heat. Just a hush, the reeds, and the sense that the earth itself is holding its breath. The ground feels different here, charged, as if memory itself has settled into each grain of sand. It is a place that seems to repel certainty and attract curiosity, a place where even the most skeptical visitor finds themselves squinting at the ripples, wondering where the border lies between geology and geometry. Beneath the silt, modern sonar has traced odd patterns, shapes too regular, too deliberate. They surface on screen as faint outlines, blocks set at angles, curves that echo the familiar lines of the Sphinx that sits above the sand. Divers have returned with stories of stone that feels worked by hand, with grooves and ridges that seem to have purpose. Yet still, the water muddies everything, making proof as slippery as the eels that dart through the reeds. It is the possibility that haunts the imagination, that this submerged form, this half-hidden Sphinx, is not just an echo of the monument above, but its elder. Not by a handful of years, but by thousands. If true, it would twist the accepted timeline of Egyptology into a knot. The textbooks would have to be rewritten. The story of the Giza Plateau, so carefully mapped and debated, would suddenly open into a chasm of uncertainty. Was there a civilization here before the pharaohs, before the hieroglyphs, before Egypt as we know it? Did a forgotten people shape this guardian, and then watch it drown as the Nile changed its course? Mainstream scholars, those who keep the gates of official history, are quick to wave away such notions. They point to the tricks of water and time, the way limestone can be carved by nothing more than patience, and the gentle insistence of a river. In Egypt, they say, nature is the grandest of forgers. One moment a rock, the next a monument, if you look at it sideways and wish hard enough. Yet the evidence, ambiguous as it is, refuses to be washed away. The sonar scans, the photographs, always grainy, always unsatisfying. The testimonies of those few who have braved the mud and silence to press their hands to the cold, unyielding stone. The legend of the underwater Sphinx didn't always drift in the realm of international curiosity. For generations, it was the stuff of fireside tales, a rumor, a challenge, a dare. But in the 1980s, curiosity grew teeth. Independent researchers, fueled by skepticism and a whiff of rebellion, began to investigate. Some donned wetsuits and flippers, others pored over satellite images. Still others haunted local archives for any scrap of supporting legend. The first published reports were dismissed, as all great mysteries are, as the ramblings of enthusiasts too enchanted by the idea of lost civilizations. But something shifted. The idea stuck. The suggestion that a sphinx might lie beneath the Nile's muddy waters began to gnaw at the edges of certainty. One amateur Egyptologist, the sort who collects rumors like other people collect stamps, claimed to have glimpsed a monument during a rare drought, when the water receded just enough to lay bare a portion of the stone. He described geometry, legs, symmetry, the ghost of a face where mud had not yet claimed every feature. His account was met with raised eyebrows and polite smirks, yet it refused to vanish. After all, history is full of things that were once considered impossible, until they weren't. To challenge the timeline of Giza is to poke a sleeping lion. The foundations of Egyptology are built on chronology, on careful alignment of artifacts, tombs, and texts. The accepted story has the Great Sphinx built around 2500 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. To suggest that another Sphinx, older and hidden, exists nearby is to suggest that the whole chronology is built on sand. It would mean that Egypt's story started not with kings, but with something else, Perhaps a civilization lost to the Nile's floods, or perhaps a culture whose only monuments were left to be scoured by time and water. The reaction from academic circles was swift and cool. Without official excavation, without carbon dating, without the blessed certainty of peer review, no claim could be entertained. The so-called underwater sphinx, they said, was a trick of geology, a limestone outcrop shaped by millennia of flood and sediment. Yet the idea lingered, refusing to sink. The scans, the photographs, the whispered stories, they gathered like silt after a storm, layering possibility atop possibility. Soon the theorists arrived. Authors with a taste for the fringe, filmmakers thirsty for drama, and historians who felt unburdened by consensus. They spun tales of lost continents, of Atlantis and antediluvian wonders. They pointed to the patterns of erosion on the standing sphinx, runnels and grooves that some say could only have been carved by heavy, ancient rainfall, not the arid winds of the Sahara. If water had sculpted the original sphinx, why not another? Why not here, where the Nile once fanned into 1,000 green fingers, where the world was wetter, wilder, and prone to hiding its secrets in the mud? As the debate grew, the ground itself remained stubbornly silent. No official dig was ever launched. No museum sent a team. The supposed sphinx lay undisturbed, caught between myth and mud, waiting for the river to either swallow it whole, or, perhaps, reveal it to a world finally ready to listen. The idea that something near Giza might predate the pyramids is not just a curiosity, it's a provocation. It rattles the very bones of our understanding. If the underwater sphinx is real, if it was carved by hands long before Khafre's masons ever lifted a chisel, then Egypt's story stretches back into a past so distant it borders on legend. This notion gained a twist of legitimacy in the 1990s when a geologist named Robert Schoch examined the Sphinx's enclosure. He saw not the work of wind and sand, but the marks of heavy ancient rain, a climate the Giza Plateau hadn't seen since at least 7,000 BCE. That would mean the Sphinx is older by thousands of years, built before the first hieroglyphs, before the first pharaohs even dreamed of immortality. If water shaped the original Sphinx, could it not also have hidden an even older sibling, drowned beneath the Nile's shifting moods? The so-called underwater Sphinx sits where the river once sprawled, in a lowland thick with floodplain memory. Satellite images hint at rectangles, foundations, lines too straight for accident, all buried beneath sediment and seasonal tides. Some say these are the scars of a monument, not yet lost, but waiting, patient as only stone can be. The possibility that it predates writing itself, that it belongs to an age when Egypt was a tangle of green savanna and wandering herds, invites both awe and skepticism in equal measure. Supporters of the theory point to the gaps in Egypt's own story, the centuries between the end of the last ice age and the dawn of the dynasties. During that deep twilight, the Nile wandered, the Sahara shifted from lush grassland to the desert we know, and perhaps, just perhaps, civilizations rose and fell with nothing left but the rumor of stone beneath silt. The very idea that pre-literate peoples could have shaped a monument of this scale is enough to make any traditional historian choke on their morning bread. And yet, elsewhere, the impossible has happened. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Hunter-gatherers shaped pillars and monuments as early as 9600 BCE, thousands of years before Stonehenge. If it could happen there, why not here, where the Nile once streamed of green? If the underwater Sphinx was carved in such an era, it would not just rewrite Egypt's history. It would force us to reimagine the story of civilization itself. A story not of sudden emergence, but of deep, patient accumulation, marked by floods and memory, and the slow shifting of stone. It would mean that the Nile's waters have hidden more than fish and reeds. They have hidden a chapter of our shared past, one that may yet be waiting for the right drought, the right question, or the right pair of eyes to bring it into the sun. For now, the underwater Sphinx waits. It does not sleep, not really. It lingers, silent, just beneath the surface, its secrets muffled by mud and time. If it could speak, what would it say? Perhaps nothing more than a sigh, an invitation to look deeper, to question more, to wonder why so many prefer the comfort of sand to the uncertainty of silt. You stand on the edge, the mud tugging at your boots, the air thick with possibility, and you realize that sometimes the most enduring mysteries are the ones nobody is quite ready to solve. As you turn from the marsh and the whispers of fishermen, the memory of stone lingers in your mind, a question suspended between water and sky. Ahead, the story deepens, for the Nile has not one, but several secrets. And the next is waiting just a little farther north, near Abu Rash, where stone remembers. Stone does not simply exist, it bears witness. It holds memories deeper than any scroll. And at the edge of Abu Rash, the so-called underwater Sphinx invites you to listen closely to its silent testimony. Here, as you drift through a dusk-lit landscape of reeds and shifting sand, the earth tells a story, not just of ages past, but of water. Water that once shaped and drowned this very place. If you pause and let your senses wander, you can almost hear the ghostly rush of an ancient river, feel the cool breath of an age before the desert swallowed the world. Now, as your historical sleep concierge, I guide you down a gentle slope of time, past the hum of present-day Egypt and into the hush of prehistory. The sediment beneath your feet is not random. It forms thick layers, each pressed with secrets, the sweep of Nile floods, the long-forgotten storms, and the patient work of water-carving stone. Geologists who braved the muddy basin near Abu Rash report seeing marks on the limestone that defy the logic of mere wind and sand. Instead, these stones wear the signature of flowing water, smooth, rounded grooves and deep vertical striations, impossible to ignore once you've seen them. Not a trick of the eye, but a message from a time when Egypt was lush, green, and awash in rain that hasn't fallen for millennia. If you've heard whispers about the Great Sphinx, you know this isn't the only monument whose scars suggest another age. The Sphinx at Giza, with its battered enclosure, shows similar vertical fissures, marks that look more like the result of heavy rainfall than the handiwork of desert winds. In the quiet of night, as you listen to the wind rattle across the stones, you might wonder, did the same ancient storms that once battered the Giza Plateau also leave their mark here at Abu Rash? The evidence, though buried beneath mud and water, seems to echo that possibility. At the underwater Sphinx site, the tale grows stranger still. During rare periods when the Nile shrinks back and the basin lies exposed, the outlines of something unmistakably intentional appear. Scholars describe the hunch of a lion's shoulders, the broad sweep of a foundation so level it seems to defy nature. You find yourself peering through the murky shallows, searching for lines and symmetry where logic says there should be only chaos. Those who have surveyed this area, often at great personal expense and with no official blessing, speak of a landscape alive with hidden dramas. The basin itself is restless, its clay-rich soil betraying the memory of ancient water tables that rose and fell like the breathing of the earth. The stones are abraded, but not haphazardly. The wear follows the imagined contours of a great beast, as if the monument was first shaped by human hands and then softened, almost caressed, by centuries of flooding. Some sediment layers here date back to the very dawn of the Holocene, a time when Egypt was a world of wild rivers and vast wetlands. Imagine carving a monument in those primeval days, watching it stand proud for generations before the floods claimed it, burying it beneath mud and leaving it for the next civilization to forget. Picture the shifting population, the rise and fall of kingdoms, while the sphinx-like form slumbers beneath the silt, waiting for another age of curiosity. Of course, not everyone is enchanted by this story. Skeptics, ever alert, wag their fingers and call this a case of wishful thinking. To them, the so-called Sphinx is just a trick of nature, a random outcrop that overzealous eyes have sculpted into myth. Water, after all, doesn't care about symmetry. It does not create foundations that echo the geometry of Giza. It does not carve pores, nor does it align monuments to the cardinal points. Yet, in the quiet moments, that question lingers. If nature didn't make these shapes, who did? And if water erased a monument here, what else might lie hidden, erased by time and tide? You might be wondering, as you lie back on this imaginary riverbank, why has no one dug to the bottom of this mystery? If the underwater Sphinx is truly there, silent, ancient, and carved by hands long lost, why does it remain untouched, ignored by both archaeologists and officials? The answer, like the site itself, is buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and caution. Egypt's archaeological institutions guard their history with the vigilance of a lion at the threshold. Digging anywhere near the Nile, especially at a site that could upset the tidy timeline of pharaohs and dynasties, demands more than a curious mind. It takes permits, funding, endless paperwork, and above all, the blessing of committees who would rather not see the sands of history stirred up without overwhelming evidence. Their unspoken rule is simple. Do not rewrite the story of Egypt without proof so solid it could withstand a flood of its own. And therein lies the impasse. The underwater Sphinx has never received a full, official excavation. Instead, it has attracted a parade of outsiders, independent scholars, foreign academics, intrepid geologists, and the occasional wild-eyed theorist. They come armed with satellite images, ground-penetrating radar, and a sense of adventure, but without institutional support. Their conclusions remain whispers, suggestive, tantalizing, but always just out of reach of certainty. Then there is the Nile itself, fickle and perpetually in motion. The site is no dry plateau. It lies in a floodplain, submerged for much of the year and prone to sudden inundations. Draining the area would require engineering on a heroic scale, rerouting water, reinforcing banks, protecting fragile ecosystems, and somehow managing the delicate stonework after centuries of compressed mud. Even the most optimistic plan would demand years, if not decades, of careful, painstaking work. And that's just the logistical headache. The political cost would be even higher. Imagine the headlines if a new Sphinx was found. A monument that could throw established history into chaos. National pride, academic reputations, the lucrative machinery of tourism, all would be at risk. The Ministry of Antiquities prefers its headlines to be grand, but not destabilizing. Its discoveries to be awe-inspiring, but on message. A monument that hints at a civilization older than the pharaohs, or that suggests Egypt's mythic guardianship was not a singular event, could unravel the narrative so carefully preserved. Rumor has it that some institutions know more than they admit. That at night, behind locked doors, preliminary surveys have already been examined, and that the results, whatever they are, remain a closely guarded secret. But without public records, peer-reviewed studies, or official proclamations, these stories remain just that, rumors drifting on the Nile's breeze, half believed and half dismissed. And so, the monument, if it is a monument, remains unclaimed, sleeping beneath its shroud of mud and skepticism. Whether by accident or the quiet design of those who would rather not ask troubling questions, the underwater Sphinx waits. There's a peculiar irony at work here, in a land obsessed with preserving every scrap of its ancient glory. One of its most profound riddles may be left to slumber in plain sight, untouched by official curiosity, and absent from the chronicles of time. But, as you and I both know, nothing in history stays buried forever. The ancient Egyptians understood this better than anyone. For them, the Sphinx was not just a statue, but a threshold, a guardian between worlds, part lion, part human, forever watching the horizon where the sun is reborn each day. The Sphinx embodied the balance of strength and wisdom, brute force bound by the mind of a king. It was both protector and enigma, looming at the crossroads where the divine brushed up against mortal affairs. The great Sphinx of Giza still gazes east, as it has for over 4,000 years, its battered face half-shadowed by mystery. Some say it was carved in the reign of Khafra. Others argue it is far older, its head recarved and its body battered by storms of another era. The truth is as elusive as the sand that drifts across its pores each night. Now, imagine a second Sphinx, a secret twin, older, battered by water, hidden just miles away beneath the Nile's restless floods. Such a discovery would not simply add a footnote to history, it would demand a complete retelling. No ancient Egyptian text mentions twin sphinxes at Giza, but in later Greco-Roman tradition, there are scattered hints of paired guardians flanking sacred spaces. Egyptian temples, too, often honored symmetry, twin obelisks, twin statues, avenues lined with lions in pairs. Why not two sphinxes, standing watch together at the world's edge? Some researchers propose that this underwater guardian is not a mere copy, but the prototype, the original vision, a pre-dynastic sphinx whose myth was revived and expanded upon by later kings. If this theory is true, the roots of the Sphinx legend run deeper than the dynasties, perhaps reaching back to a lost culture whose stories and rituals predated writing itself. In that case, the Sphinx's purpose might not have been royal at all. It could have been astronomical, marking the stars and floods. It might have been ritual, a commemoration of a cataclysm, or the memorial of a forgotten god. The choice of a lion was never accidental. To the Egyptians, lions stood for the horizon, the liminal place between night and dawn. A sphinx facing east was a prayer frozen in stone for the sun's eternal return. Now, imagine the first sphinx carved before the pyramids, watching the sunrise in a world unrecognizable to us. Such a monument would not just change the timeline. It would transform the very myth at Egypt's heart, shifting it from the beginning of civilization to the echo of something even more ancient. And if this guardian is truly slumbering beneath water, there's a poetic rightness to it. What better fate for the sentinel of lost worlds than to be hidden in the place where earth and water mingle, waiting for someone curious enough to look beneath the surface? As tales of the underwater sphinx ripple outward, a fault line has formed in the world of history. On one bank, traditional Egyptology stands, cautious and deliberate, determined to build its house on the rock of peer-reviewed evidence. On the other, a swelling crowd of independent researchers, alternative historians, and restless dreamers gather, convinced that something extraordinary has been overlooked. Mainstream scholars have their reasons. Egypt is littered with natural formations that, in the right light, can look like faces or paws. The risk of mistaking a lump of limestone for a monument is real, and the consequences for science are not trivial. The past is fragile and easily lost to overzealous excavation or overhyped speculation. Yet to the dissenters, caution too often becomes inertia. Why not probe deeper? Why not let curiosity lead the way, especially when satellite scans reveal right angles, when ground-penetrating radar picks up buried walls, and when erosion patterns refuse to act like random acts of geology? There is also the uncomfortable question of politics. Tourism is Egypt's lifeblood, and its narrative is a carefully tended garden. A new sphinx, especially one that threatens to upend the official story, could turn that garden into a wilderness of uncertainty. For those in power, the fear is not of fraud, but of rewriting everything. Textbooks, documentaries, the very image of Egypt in the world's imagination. So, the underwater sphinx has become a symbol as much as a mystery, a rallying point for those who crave forbidden knowledge, and a cautionary tale for those who warn against the siren song of pseudoscience. The arguments swirl like the Nile's silt, thickening the air with hope, skepticism, and a touch of rebellion. In the end, the truth remains hidden, lost somewhere between the voices, buried as deeply as the monument itself. But the question the underwater sphinx asks is not just archaeological, it's personal. How do you, lying here on the banks of time, choose to approach the past? Do you cling to what's confirmed, or do you chase the hints, the shadows, the possibilities just out of reach? In many ways, the underwater sphinx is a test, not of stone, but of curiosity. How far are you willing to go to find out what sleeps beneath the silence? And as you drift onward, the night deepening, the whisper of stone and water still lingering in your ear, you sense that this story is not quite finished. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries are not those lost in darkness, but those hiding in the open, waiting for the right pair of eyes to see them. The next step on our journey brings us even closer to the heart of the enigma, a place where the face of a lion, half buried in mud, stares back at you with ancient, unblinking silence. There's a peculiar shiver that runs through you when you're confronted by a riddle so bold it dares you to walk right past it. Imagine yourself standing at the muddy banks near Giza, the air thick with humidity and the faint scent of wet earth. Here, the so-called underwater sphinx waits, half shrouded in silt and rumour. Its lion's face, if you squint, seems to peer upward through time, silent and unreadable. No matter how many times you try to dismiss it, the pull is stubborn. The possibility of its existence tugs at something deep inside, a thread not merely of curiosity, but of memory. It's as if the forgotten monument, real or imagined, speaks to a longing old as humanity itself, the urge not just to discover what is lost, but to remember what was once cherished and then forgotten. You, like all travellers in this winding nocturne of history, have always lived in the shadow of ruins. Civilizations crumble, cities are claimed by sand, languages dissolve into the hush of the past. The Nile's waters, so patient, have covered and uncovered stories for millennia. And here you are, ankle deep in the mud, contemplating a stone shape that might be nothing or everything. We search the past not only for answers, but to piece together the fragile mosaic of our own identity. Who were we before the lights, before the Wi-Fi passwords, and questionable late-night snacks? How far does our story wind backwards before vanishing into mist? And in our relentless sprint toward the next innovation, what treasures have we left behind, gathering silt and silence? If the underwater sphinx is real, truly carved, shaped by hands before history wrote its first word, then it becomes more than a simple relic. It transforms into a voice, echoing from a lost chapter, a marker from a time when people read the stars with different eyes and honored the earth with a tenderness we can barely grasp. Some whisper that it is the handiwork of a forgotten, advanced culture, wiped away by catastrophe, a theory often relegated to the dusty shelf-marked fringe. But even if we never know the truth, the emotional weight remains. To imagine a monument chiseled before the pyramids, drowned beneath rising waters, and erased from memory is to face, head-on, how fragile and fleeting civilization can be. Perhaps that's why the legend endures. It refuses to be quieted. It reminds you that time doesn't march in a straight line, that even the grandest empire can vanish if the river flows long enough. Stone wears down, memory dissolves, and yet something persists. The story calls softly, discovery is not finished. The earth still harbors secrets that outwit our algorithms and satellite eyes. In a world where answers are instant, where every question teeters on the edge of a search bar, the underwater sphinx offers a rare and precious gift, a question that cannot be answered, a possibility that remains deliciously unresolved. Is it carved or merely a trick of the mud? Is it a monument or a mirage? The answer matters less than the wonder it inspires. It prods at the edges of your certainty. Is the past deeper than we dared imagine? Do myths coil around kernels of truth, waiting for us to listen instead of dismiss? What else lies just beneath the silt, just out of reach, hoping for a patient ear or a curious hand? The underwater Sphinx of Giza, whether sculpted or accidental, proven or scoffed at, remains where it has always been, beneath water, beneath earth, beneath the slow, relentless drift of time. There is no plaque to commemorate it, no spotlight to grant it official status. It speaks only in the hush of unanswered questions. For every monument we have unearthed in Egypt, there are countless others still smothered by sand, too delicate to disturb or swept away by the restless Nile. Some, like this one, remain right before our eyes, ignored not because they are insignificant, but because they ask questions we're not quite ready to face. Maybe that is the true power of the underwater Sphinx, not its size nor its age, but its silence. It compels you to acknowledge the boundaries of your knowledge and the discomfort of the mysteries you've overlooked. The likelihood is it will never be excavated, caught between politics, tradition, funding, and the inertia of the known. But make no mistake, its obscurity is not a weakness. In fact, the Sphinx has become a mirror, reflecting not just what lies buried in the mud, but what remains hidden in ourselves, what we choose to cherish, and what we let slip away. History, you realize, is not a book with a neat beginning and end. It is a living, breathing puzzle, scattered across landscapes and riverbanks, waiting for a shift in tide or a spark of courage to bring forgotten pieces to light. Perhaps one day the water will withdraw, and the Sphinx's true form will stand revealed. Maybe a future scan will confirm the old legends. Or perhaps, like all the best stories, the mystery will linger, passed on as a whisper among stones, a riddle shared in the quiet moments before sleep. Whether this monument is real or merely a trick of shadow and hope, it has already fulfilled its highest purpose. It stirs imagination. In a time so crowded with certainty, perhaps what we need most is a little wonder. Because, just maybe, the oldest mysteries aren't only buried beneath the sand or the water. They are buried in us, in our need to search, to remember, and to believe that somewhere beneath the waves or the dust, the past is still alive, still waiting for us to listen.